Hello, I'm Ralph Emery, wishing you joy and all other miracles of this special holiday season from the whole gang at Nashville Now and TNN.
The pioneers of stock car racing forged a rich tradition of exciting competition. Finally, the first book ever devoted exclusively to the sport's colorful early days. If you're a real stock car racing fan, you've got to own this book. Hi, I'm Ned Jarrett. I have a lot of fond memories about those early days in stock car racing. That's why I'm so excited about this series of books, 40 Years of Stock Car Racing. In Volume 1, the thrilling first decade of stock car racing comes back to life in more than 300 pages of racing summaries, box scores, and hundreds of rare photos. 40 Years of Stock Car Racing. It's your complete source for NASCAR's formative years. If you're a real stock car racing fan, you've got to own this book.
Have your credit card handy and call toll-free 1-800-238-9300 or save COD charges by sending $24.95 plus $2 shipping and handling to 40 Years of Stock Car Racing, P.O. Box 10030, Stamford, Connecticut 06904.
Tuesday, watch the Oak Ridge Boys Christmas special on TNN.
Inside Winston Cup Racing, a weekly 30-minute look at the men and machines that make up the world's most popular motorsport, with your hosts, Ned Jarrett and Steve Burns. Today's show is brought to you in part by Goodyear Eagle Tires. Goodyear, because there really is a difference. And by Old Milwaukee and Old Milwaukee Light. It doesn't get any better than this.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Inside Winston Cup Racing. Once a year, we get to come to New York City and dress up for the NASCAR Winston Cup Awards Banquet. We're in the grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, where a lot of money was passed out.
And Ned, everyone was here to receive their honors. And while we were here, the R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company, the sponsor of the Winston Cup Series, made a dramatic announcement concerning a bonus payout to the 1989 Winston Cup champion. We'll have more on that in just a little while. Now let's go to Randy Pemberton.
After all the long hours and hard work, it all culminated right here in New York City at the Grand Waldorf Astoria. That's where the drivers and teams came to pick up their accolades and awards. And now here's what else we have coming up in this half hour of Inside Winston Cup Racing.
We look at the biggest stories of the 1988 NASCAR Winston Cup season, another record-breaking year for the most popular form of auto racing in the world.
We'll also examine the dramatic changes that took place in the sport. Some up-and-coming stars stake their claim as the sport's biggest names,
while some superstars of the sport said farewell. And we'll also review the championship battle between Rusty Wallace and Bill Elliott. We'll be right back.
Lafitte, Louisiana and Old Milwaukee both mean something great to these guys. Lafitte means flat bottom boat racing. And a Cajun feast that'll...
It was an explosive year.
And the reason for all that growth, Ned, is very elementary. It's the most exciting series of auto racing in the world. We see bumper-to-bumper racing side by side every week. And let's begin our review of the 1988 Winston Cup season.
The 1988 NASCAR Winston Cup season began with some big expectations for some and question marks for others. After winning 2 consecutive championships, would Dale Earnhardt and team be able to sustain enough momentum to enable them to become enshrined as only the second team in history to win 3 championships in succession? Possibly even bigger news heading into the first race at Daytona was the reemergence of driving sensation Tim Richmond. After winning 3 races in 1987, then retiring just halfway through the season, there was continued controversy surrounding Tim's health. The controversy was heightened when during speed weeks at Daytona, Tim tested positive, then negative under NASCAR's substance abuse policy. Tim's medical records were summoned by NASCAR. They were not supplied, and as of today, the issue remains to be resolved in a court of law. And Tim Richmond's future in NASCAR remains uncertain. On a brighter note, Neil Bonnet was back on the circuit and looking good. After missing the final few races of 1987 while recuperating from a hip and leg injury suffered in a crash during the Oakwood Homes 500 at Charlotte. NASCAR was also looking good going into 1988, as nearly 70 cars would vie for 42 positions in the field for the Daytona 500. Not only was NASCAR becoming a more popular form of racing for car owners, but for marketing and promotional executives as well. Reportedly, over 30 cars adorned big-name products on the side of their race cars as sponsors. Some teams obtaining as much as $2 million to complete the full schedule of Winston Cup events. The Busch Clash was the first event of 1988, and it was a test to see if in the off-season the teams were able to improve on their horsepower in light of the continued implementation by NASCAR of carburetor restrictor plates on the super speedways of Daytona and Talladega. The solid week of Daytona racing started off great, and Dale Earnhardt picked up where he left off in 1987, capturing the race for the previous season's pole winners, but the rest of the week belonged to the fans and to Bobby Allison. Allison would capture his leg of the two 125-mile qualifiers and establish himself as the favorite to win the 500-mile Classic just days away. But in between those two races was the always exciting 300-mile Busch Grand National event. The racing was keen from the beginning, and only a major accident blemished the event, taking out several drivers in the process. But when the smoke cleared, it was Bobby Allison holding off a crowd to capture the victory. The Daytona 500 had a little bit of everything, including one of the most horrifying wrecks of the season, involving Richard Petty. The King would walk away from this one. The event they called their Super Bowl had a record 17 cars on the lead lap at the conclusion, none of which had a shot to beat Bobby Allison, with the exception of Son Davey, as they finished 1-2 over the start-finish line. The win marked Allison's 16th at the famed World Center of Racing. Although the upstart Hoosier Tire Company made its debut at Daytona, their reputation was given a strong shot in the arm 1 week later as they rolled into victory lane on Neil Bonnet's Pontiac at the Richmond Fairgrounds Raceway, assuring that both the tire company and Bonnet would make an impact on the 1988 season. Bonnet's impact would get international attention soon after, as he would win the first ever NASCAR-type event held abroad. The Calder Thunderdome in Melbourne, Australia, with an estimated 40,000 plus and an international television audience, watched Neil Bonnet outduel Bobby Allison for the win. Bonnet scored his third racing victory in a row by winning at Rockingham, the third race on the Winston Cup schedule. That would be, though, the last victory lane of the season for Bonnet, as he was plagued by both physical problems and mechanical problems professionally.
Neil Bonnet will be back with the Wood Brothers in 1989. Steve, they've talked about the changing of the guard over the years. Well, it became official in 1988.
We've heard an awful lot about the young lions, such as Rusty Wallace, Alan Kulwicki, Mike Waltrip is emerging as a force on this series. But you know, Ned, as good a year as it was for some of the younger drivers, it was a tough year for some of the sport's superstars and champions.
Along with Bonnet, other longtime pillars in the sport had some of their worst of times in 1988. In the twilight of his career, King Richard suffered through his worst season in 30 years. Accidents and engine failures would allow Richard only one top 5 finish and would keep the elusive victory, number 201, at least another season away. On a brighter note, King Richard will be looking for that victory 201 in the 1989 Daytona 500. The only man to ever win 3 consecutive Winston Cup titles, Cale Yarborough was seen more on the sidelines than in a race car in 1988. Cale, now the owner of his own Hardee's Oldsmobile cars, split the driving duties with driver Dale Jarrett. Cale finished out his career with a very solid 10th place finish, though, in the Atlanta Journal 500. Benny Parsons' final career start also came in Atlanta. Benny's final run in Junie Don Levy's Ford ended with a crash. Benny now looks forward to a promising career as a TV analyst. While Buddy Baker never officially announced his retirement, he has moved over to let Greg Sachs take the wheel of the Baker-owned Oldsmobiles. Baker had surgery on his head to relieve a blood clot halfway through the season. And though it is speculated that they will prepare a second car for him in selected races in 1989. The day was June 19th. That was the day the racing world stood still. It was the Miller 500 in Pocono, Pennsylvania. Lap number 1, Bobby Allison gets hit in the driver's door after a tire went down going through turn number 2. Allison's accident devastated the Allison family, and Bobby himself fought for his life.
Of course, Bobby Allison did win the race for his life, but there is some doubt whether he will race again, but he does continue to improve.
Ned, Mike Alexander filled in for Bobby during the season and did a very good job in his car. He'll be back with the Stavola brothers and Miller Racing next year. We need to take a short break right now. When we come back, we'll meet Phil Parsons.
And we'll also have the latest news, so you stay with us. Who drives the Crown Skull Oldsmobile, he really came into his own.
He sure did. He picked up the first victory of his young Winston Cup career when he won the Winston 500 at Talladega in May. And Ned, for a young driver, he showed an awful lot of improvement and surprising consistency.
And that consistency propelled him into the top 10 in the Winston Cup point standings. He finished 9th.
Phil Parsons made his debut in Winston Cup racing in 1983. But it wasn't until 1987 that he ran the entire schedule of races. Prior to this season, Phil had competed in 102 Winston Cup races and had just 19 top 10 finishes. This season, in just 29 events, he finished in the top 10 16 times.
I think every lap you run, you get better, and I've just got that many more laps under my belt. Last year was the first year that I had run all the races, so that was really critical as far as going to the next step. And you know, last year is just about the first time that I'd been to a lot of the racetracks, and I learned a lot, and then came back and applied it this year. So I think it's just been a gradual thing, and then in last year really helped. You know, I got twice the experience last year that I would have only running a partial schedule. So that it's like 2 years in one. So that put me ahead of the schedule.
Phil's victory at Talladega in May was something of a surprise, but definitely not a fluke. He battled with Jeff Bodine and Bobby Allison all afternoon with the poise and concentration of a seasoned veteran. When he took the checkered flag, he gained a lot of respect and entered the elite club of Winston Cup winners.
Well, it's hard to put into words. I've said many times that it was the most special feeling I've ever had, other than my little girl being born, and that was a pretty special feeling. So I don't know, it's something that I've wanted and worked for and hoped for years and years and years. And when it finally came true, it was all that I'd hoped it would be.
Phil has every reason to be excited about the upcoming season. He's been through the school of hard knocks and has learned his lessons well. Phil Parsons has graduated with honors and is on his way in becoming a major force on the Winston Cup circuit.
It really makes us optimistic for next year. You know, we improved a great deal over last year, so if we can show the same improvement next year that we did this year, then I think we'll really be someone to contend with next year.
Ned, as amazing as it may sound, Phil Parsons and the rest of the Winston Cup drivers will be racing for even more money in 1989.
The R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company announced here in New York that the point fund will increase to $2.5 million next year, with the Winston Cup champion taking down $1 million.
Amid trumpet fanfare and a miniature blimp drenched in spotlights, R.J. Reynolds President and Chief Executive Officer Dolph Von Arx made the stunning announcement.
When we honor the 1989 Winston Cup champion 1 year from now, it will be my pleasure to reward his achievement with a check for 1 million big ones, $1 million.
Unocal 76 executives announced their version of golf's skins game, a bonus going to the driver who sits on the pole and goes on to win the race.
Every race in the Winston Cup Series next year, we will put up $7,600 to be won if and when the Bush pole sitter wins that race. When it's not won in The first race, it rolls to the second race and continues to do so.
Mike Alexander, the driver of the Miller Beer Buick, was seriously injured in a race in Pensacola, Florida last Sunday. He suffered multiple fractures and was knocked unconscious. The latest report was that Mike had regained consciousness and was in stable condition. We'll keep you posted on Mike's recovery.
Steve, talk about that $1 million bonus for the Winston Cup champion. That's 3 times as much money as I won during my whole career in 13 years of racing. And it's hard to believe that there could be a better battle for the Winston Cup Championship than we saw this year between Rusty Wallace and Bill Elliott. Now, we need to take a short break. When we come back, we'll review that battle between those two drivers.
And then we'll also talk to some of the folks here that came to visit the Big Apple about their highlights of this trip. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
I think 85 would have really been overshadowed if I'd have been up here then. I'm just truly proud to be up here tonight and be proud of Winston Cup racing. And I thank you very much. Thank you, guys.
Snake River, Wyoming, and Old Milwaukee both mean something.
Of the world's best engineered performance cars, Goodyear Eagles, because there really is a difference.
Next week here on Inside Winston Cup Racing, you'll meet the 1988 Busch Grand National Champion, Tommy Ellis, a man who is misunderstood.
We'll continue our series on the top 10 drivers on the NASCAR Winston Cup circuit. Next week, we'll talk with Davey Allison.
We'll also update all the latest news and have the 1989 Winston Cup schedule. Ned, the competition on the racetrack this past season was, in a word, outstanding. A record number of drivers visited Victory Lane, 14.
And 4 of those were first-time winners on the circuit. Now let's continue our review of the 1988 competition on the Winston Cup circuit.
On March 27th, the Darlington International Raceway would get credit as having the first-time winner of the season as Lake Speed grabbed the Trans-South 500 for his first career victory. It took him 164 starts. Phil Parsons assured that the Parsons name would continue to be synonymous with racing as Phil captured career victory number 1 in his 111th start in the Winston 500 at Talladega, Alabama. Ken Schrader backed up his best season in the sport with his first career victory, also at Talladega in the Talladega 500. Another first-time winner was Alan Kawicki. Kawicki grabbed his at the first NASCAR race ever held at the Phoenix International Raceway. Rusty Wallace's name will go in the books as the final victor ever at the Riverside International Raceway, as the property has now given way to bulldozers of a land developer. Richmond Fairgrounds turned into Richmond International Raceway for its second date on the calendar. Davey Allison christened the new facility, capturing his second victory of the year. Several young drivers came close to victory in 1988. Michael Waltrip, Brett Bodine, Mark Martin, Rick Wilson, and Sterling Marlin all had several close but no cigar-type runs. Marlin did gain victory in the Winston Open, the preliminary event to the Winston, but it wasn't an official Winston Cup victory. Terry Labonte took home over $200,000 on the same afternoon by winning the Winston. The pressure to win was evident throughout the season, as several drivers were reprimanded for rough driving throughout the season. Bill Elliott would recover from this spin to claim his first ever short track victory. Rookie of the Year contenders Ernie Irvin and Ken Bouchard had a torrid battle over the final half of the season. That championship went right down to the final race in Atlanta. Ken Bouchard didn't make the event, but clinched the title when Ernie Irvin failed to finish in the top 8 of the Atlanta Journal 500. The highlight of the season would have to be the Blue Max racing team with driver Rusty Wallace. After trailing points leader Bill Elliott by less than 20 points entering the September 11th race at Richmond, Virginia, Wallace would crash with Jeff Bodine on lap 1. That ended his day and possibly his bid for the championship. But Rusty Wallace and team didn't go down without a fight. Over the final 7 races, they posted 4 victories, 2 thirds, and a 5th, including the final win of the year at Atlanta. Rusty would chase Bill to the final lap of the Atlanta Journal 500 as both were in quest for the coveted Winston Cup crown. Elliott would take the title by 24 points in one of the closest Winston Cup title races in history.
And I'm here with Bill Elliott, the 1988 Winston Cup champion. Bill, we talked with you just about a few weeks ago at Atlanta. Have you had a chance to reflect on the accomplishments of 1988?
Well, you know, the thing of it is, I reflect back on this team from the time we started racing and all the accomplishments it's made and everything it's done positive. And it's unbelievable to come from where we were at, you know, running a few races to where we're at right now. It's unbelievable. I think that says a lot for the group of guys we got back at the shop, you know, the support from Coors, Motorcraft, Harry Melling, Ford, and everyone else. You know, Winston's done a lot for me here in New York, and I can't say enough about that. This is the most enjoyable trip I've ever been to New York. But, you know, still, the team did the job, and it's a team effort from the crew all the way down to the guys working back at the shop to me trying to get around the racetrack. And you know, it's beyond words. You know, this night's going to mean a lot to me for the rest of my life.
Well, you hate to take away anything from tonight, but you have to look forward to next year, and RJR's put up $1 million next year to win a championship.
You know, I sat here at the end of '84, and I can remember when R.J. Reynolds said they were going to put $1 million up for the guy that wins 3 out of the 4 major races. And, you know, I'd never believed I'd have done it, but I came back here at the end of '85, and I had done it. And the thing of it is, from that point on, we felt like we could do it. We go out with the attitude that we can do it. Sometimes it don't work out, but we're still working and trying to achieve those goals. And I'd like to be back here on stage. You know, I've got a little bit of a taste of it, and I love it up here. And for the few guys that's been up here, it's been fantastic.
Bill, you're a deserving champion, and congratulations on your championship.
Appreciate it.
Well, Bill Elliott wasn't the only person here collecting awards this evening. We got an opportunity to talk to some of the other competitors to get their opinions on the season and also tonight's gala here at the Waldorf.
As long as you get up on stage, it makes you feel good. And to watch a fellow like Bill Elliott finally win the championship, you know, gives us hope that it can happen to us. You know, he sat out here and watched Darrell and Dale and everyone else go up on stage many years, and we're still watching them go up. But next year, maybe it's our turn. We think it can be.
R.J. Reynolds increasing everything up to $1 million, and Union 76 Company with their great award of $220,000 bonus, and for a driver who can sit on a pole and win the race. 1989 has a lot of great rewards out there.
Oh, really lovely affair, though, here at the Waldorf. Don't you think? You like coming up to New York City for it?
Oh, certainly. I sure do. I just want to get my mink coat. $10 million.
Just a beautiful evening, and I'll tell you, I must have been very proud of Lake this evening as well.
I certainly am. I'm always proud of my husband. We've had a wonderful time here in New York, and we look forward to being here next year, hopefully on that stage.
Amen. Lake, your outlook on next season?
I'll tell you what, we're, you know, 2 years the team we've had it, and built from the past year up to the full strength. Now we're finally up to full strength. We have 10 race cars and a full engine program. 1989 looks awful good to us. We're ready to go.
Our time's up for today. Hope you enjoyed our show from here in the Big Apple.
And as always, thank you for watching us here on the Nashville Network. And just a reminder, we're going to be here 52 weeks of the year and update you on all the information as we get ready for the 1989 Daytona 500.
So don't you miss a single show. See you next week.
Inside Winston Cup Racing has been brought to you in part by Old Milwaukee and Old Milwaukee Light, 2 of America's